Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to episode 62 of the podcast. Delighted to be joined once again by Mr. Oscar Pick as we discuss, well, I think quite an interesting matchup this Saturday. Rolando Romero or Rolly Romero defends the WBA Super, and I mean Super as in the Super title, welterweight title against Teofimo Lopez in quite an interesting match. I mean, I think what's interesting about this is I watched an interview and it said they were kind of friends, and at one point, uh, Teofimo lent him money or something like that. But apart from that kind of angle aside, I think it's an interesting vibe because obviously Teofimo Lopez is going to um, you know, his third weight division to become a free weight, attempt to become a free weight world champion, and obviously Rolando Romero is coming off a very good win against Ryan Garcia. Say what you want about Garcia's performance, but still, that's a very good win for Romero. And yeah, I don't know, he looks somewhat rejuvenated at 147. But anyway, Oscar, what's your initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with what you said there, how Romero's moved up in weight and he looks a lot stronger really as a fighter, like just physically strong. And I think that's one of his sort of key attributes, especially in this fight. Obviously, we haven't seen Lopez at welterweight. And you actually said, well, when we weren't recording last week, you said, which I've heard a lot of people say, that Lopez, it doesn't seem like the power's really been there in his last few performances. Like basically since moving up to super lightweight, whereas before he was kind of, getting a few highlight reel stoppages, knocking out Richard Coney, like, and certainly hurting a lot of these opponents down at lightweight. I think we have kind of noticed quite a big difference up at super lightweight. And obviously, he's mixed it, with a lot of high level fighters like Arnold Barboza, for example. He's no mug, like he's a top level operator. But so I guess at that level, guys are going to be able to handle themselves a bit more, take a better shot than some of the lower level guys. But still, like it, you can't ignore the fact that the power just doesn't seem to be quite what it was. And obviously now that he's stepping up even higher, like I'd say just by looking at him in terms of his frame, his physique, like it makes sense for him to be at 147. I think the weight should suit him in that respect. But it'll just be interesting to see what the power's like because obviously that's kind of been missing. It's certainly in the last couple of years, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree. I don't think the power's there to me. Like 140, I just didn't see the power at all, to be honest. I know Teofimo is a bit hot and cold, sometimes he fights to the level of his opponent, but even like I think didn't he fight like Steve Claggett one fight or something, and like he just couldn't put a dent in him. And I was thinking like this is quite a rudimentary fighter, and he just couldn't really, couldn't put a dent in him, couldn't cause damage. I don't think the power's there at all, to be honest. I mean, at 140, and I'm interested to see 147. I mean, look, 147 is even more added weight. He has the opportunity to gain even more muscle mass. And like you said, the frame is there, but yeah, the power really, really isn't, to be honest. I mean, from 140 anyway. So that's going to be very interesting. Whereas Rolly Romero, yeah, I think he looks big at 147. I think he looks big and like he looks strong. He looks healthy. So in that regard, I don't know. They're both like big enough to be a welterweight, I think. But it'll be interesting to see who actually hits harder, who can actually get more respect for their punches.
Mm.
I think Teofimo, should be the more skillful guy in there. I mean, yeah, the Barboza one was very good because Barboza is a very slippery fighter. That was a good win. Um, yeah, Romero's almost having a bit of like a second wind here in his career a little bit. I think he was not really that rated at the lower weights, and that win over Garcia has kind of made people think, okay, he's not as bad as he's a decent fighter. He has got some talent. Lopez currently the slight favorite according to the bookies. What do you make about that? Considering, I mean, we'll talk about the Stevenson fight after, but just off the bat, like, what do you think? What do you make about Lopez being kind of the somewhat strong favorite over Romero? Is it deserved?
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, he's the more skillful fighter. He's probably the more talented. And I didn't actually know this about Romero, but he only picked up boxing at 17 years old.
Hmm.
And obviously, like a lot of fighters start late and can still be successful. But I think at the top level, you do sometimes notice that difference between the guys that, have literally been doing this since they can walk compared to the ones that did pick it up a bit later on. So I think just in terms of Lopez's experience, the fact that he's been doing this for so long, but also competed at such a high level for a long time. You know, as you say, he's going for his um another world title in his third weight class. So I think he's clearly the more decorated fighter. I'd say the more talented and skillful. So yeah, I would make him a sizable favorite against Romero.
Yeah, and it's difficult to ignore, and it's so true. When you see fighters, to be fair, there's a lot of success stories. I think more so at heavyweight because I feel like maybe the skill gap is less so, because there's less about skill the kind of the heavier you get. Generally, the smaller guys are more skillful. You say it's
Yeah.
quite impressive. I mean, if you start at 17, that is really impressive to even become a world champion. But yeah, you have to imagine Teofimo with the amateur, and his experience. Yeah, he should be more skillful, definitely. But yeah, just Tio is very hot and cold, I think, and I think it's just one of those fights where kind of anything can happen, sort of thing. I'm not really. I think, like, I agree with you. I think he deserves to be the favorite. He's, yeah, like you said, decorated is probably the best word. He's got, the win against Lomachenko. I think that's an outstanding win. I know there's a couple weights below, but still, that's what a win to have on your resume.
Yeah.
Beat Lomachenko. If we're going off, what did you make of Stevenson's last fight? Obviously against Stevenson, he was well beaten. And look, we know Stevenson is supremely talented. Possibly pound for pound one of the most talented, if not the most talented boxer in the world. So there's obviously no shame, but he was convincingly beaten. It wasn't really close at all. It was comprehensively beaten. Well, when you take into the Stevenson fight, taking into the Stevenson fight, how does that kind of affect this fight? Could we see, I don't know, a bit of a less confident version of Teofimo Lopez? Do you reckon that fight will have any kind of effect on him in this one?
I don't know in terms of his confidence, because obviously you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but he's definitely seemed confident and kind of his usual, buoyant self in these interviews I've been watching. But the biggest concern for me, and I think a lot of people have said this, is the fact that he's still got his dad in his corner. And we all saw what happened in that Stevenson fight. Like the corner work was shockingly bad. And that's not me being, exaggerating. I think everyone found that just a complete disaster of a corner. And it's funny, you compare it to Stevenson's corner where he's got his granddad in there, who's actually, everything's very meticulous. Like in terms of the advice that he's giving, it all makes perfect sense. And then you got Teofimo Lopez's dad, who's literally saying, "Oh, just hit him!" Like, you know, where's your power? I think it's funny actually. We're talking about Lopez's power. His dad was saying in the corner, "Where's your power?" Like, and obviously I don't know, like as you say, Stevenson's such a great fighter, and I don't know if that fight would have gone any differently had it not been for Lopez Senior in the corner. But I do wonder whether it would have made any difference just for him to have a great trainer, like a great person, because I know he went to Eddie Reynoso for a little
Mm.
bit. I don't know even know if he had a fight with Eddie Reynoso. I don't think he did. But other than that, he's not really experimented with, real established trainers who know what they're doing. It's literally been his dad the whole way through, and it still is his dad. Like the fact that he's still working with him is just baffling to me. I know it's his dad, but like you're at a critical stage in your career where you want to get the best out of yourself. You want to maximize what you've got left. And I don't think he's given himself the best chance of that by staying with his dad. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but yeah,
I mean, look, they've come a long way together. They've come a long way together. So you have to say that he's had a successful career being under his dad. So we have to factor that in. Could he be even an even better fighter without his dad? Possibly, to be honest, possibly. It's funny you say talk about the Stevenson fight. I remember against the Cambosis fight, and he was saying something similar. He was basically, I think I'm paraphrasing it, but he was basically saying along the lines like, "Stop messing about, just knock him out." That's basically what he was saying. You
yeah.
know, Cambosis was seen as such a like walkover, and obviously that was a massive upset and stuff. I think, I don't know. When families involved, we see it a lot. To be honest, we see a lot. Some father-son relationships work brilliantly well in boxing. I mean, obviously Stevenson's got his granddad there. Obviously Floyd Mayweather obviously had his dad, his uncle. Obviously you've had Joe Calzaghe and his dad was an amazing relationship. You got Vidal Riley and his dad seem to have a good relationship. I can't think of any others at the top of my head, but sometimes it really works. And look, it has worked to an extent, but sometimes you need a change as well. Sometimes you do need a change, and I don't know. I don't know if it's possible that Lopez is just kind of is he that talented that maybe he's just kind of it doesn't matter what kind of corner work he gets, he can still win. I think Reynoso, I think that he just wasn't a priority there. I think that was it. He just wasn't a priority. Canelo's the main guy there. He wouldn't have the same attention probably, and that's probably why it didn't work out. It's difficult. We see people chop and change all the time, but yeah, it's interesting. I think this fight will be very telling, and I think the corner work in this fight is going to be very, very interesting, and it could be, yeah, it could be crucial. Um, what would this fight do for his legacy, Lopez? Because look, like we're saying, dad or not in the corner, he's a two-weight division world champion. Um, he was unified at 135. In your mind, what would a becoming free weight world champion do for his legacy? Yeah, what would that do for his status, do you reckon?
I think it does a lot, and it certainly opens a lot of doors because I think before we were kind of complaining about the welterweight division, saying it was a bit of a barren weight class, and then all of a sudden we've got some big names there. Lopez, Ryan Garcia, um, Devin Haney, and I think Teofimo Lopez, if he wins this fight, you've got some already built-in rivalries there with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. Like, surely he'd be looking to get one of those opponents. And the fact that he's signed this deal with the zone as well, I don't know how long term it is, but I believe obviously Devin Haney's got a similar deal with the zone. So I mean, surely that just makes sense, for them to have a unification fight afterwards. If not, maybe Ryan Garcia. But yeah, I think it does a lot for his legacy, I suppose, and in terms of his career moving forward, what kind of big fights he can get after this. I did see, and I didn't really go into it, but I think some interviewer might have asked him, whether he considers himself to be a Hall of Famer,
Mm.
already, whether by the time he retires he'll be in that conversation. I didn't actually go in to see what he said, but it did get me thinking. Like, obviously, they're two great wins against Lomachenko and Josh Taylor.
Mhm.
And if he becomes a world champion, then that obviously strengthens the argument. But I don't know if he is sort of a Hall of Fame. I don't know if I view him as a Hall of Famer yet. I mean, I might do when his career is said and done, but I thought that was like an interesting thing to sort of consider at this moment.
Yeah, that is interesting. I would say he's a Hall of Famer already, only because I don't think the barrier is that high for the Hall of Fame. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but like I can I think there are lesser fighters who have been in the Hall of Fame. Like generally, if you've kind of been like a fairly dominant world champion, you're gonna kind of make it in the Hall of Fame. I think so. I think he already is. Maybe just because of the win of Lomachenko, he was unified. He's definitely not all-time great status. He's well. He's nowhere near that for sure. But I think Hall of Fame. I would argue maybe he is already, to be honest, just because of his wins. Two-weight world champion, and if he wins, if he becomes free weight, I think it's very difficult to not put him into that conversation. In terms of the welterweight, I agree. I'm actually loving the welterweight division all of a sudden. It was so dead before, but now all of a sudden, like you got, yeah, 4 or 5 good names. And I include Conor Benn in that because at least Conor Benn's a name. Whatever you think about him, at least he's a name. At least he brings some excitement to the division. Prior to that, it was looking dire. Now we got, yeah, Teofimo, Rolly Romero, Ryan Garcia, Conor Benn, Devin Haney, maybe some other guys want to move up from 140. So it's actually become an interesting division. And yeah, I guess in my mind, if he becomes free world champion, I think it's yeah, I think it will say a lot for his career, to be honest. And I think that would be almost like a second win for him, and he could, he'd be kind of inspired to kind of to stay at 147 and really try and dominate and stuff. Um, on the flip side, what about for Romero? Because we've obviously talked about he started late, and let's be honest, he wasn't really, I don't know, taken that seriously like at 135 and stuff. If he goes on to beat Teofimo Lopez, all of a sudden is this guy kind of becoming, like, I don't know, a bit of a dark horse at 147?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, God, I think that'd be a huge win. Regardless of Lopez coming off that performance against Stevenson, for Romero to get that win, I think that's got to be a big upset. And obviously then he would have got those back-to-back victories against Garcia and Lopez. I wonder if the inactivity is going to be a bit of a problem actually, because obviously the Ryan Garcia fight was back in May of last year, and he's had a bit of time out the ring. Obviously, sometimes that can work to a fighter's favor, but other times, they're a bit rusty when they come back. So I don't know how he's going to perform based on that. But yeah, I mean, if he can get the win, and obviously I think we're both kind of favoring Lopez, but yeah, if he does win, then that's a huge statement. And yeah, I don't know. Obviously, then he puts himself in the mix to fight Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia rematch or whatever. But yeah, no, big win that would be for Romero for sure.
100%. I mean, his stock would skyrocket, and yeah, yeah, that would be it would be a massive win. It'd be the biggest win of his career, definitely. Because, for being honest, Teofimo has done more than a lot more than Ryan Garcia. I think that's yeah, it'd be a massive win. If we're talking about keys to victory, then for Rolly Romero, what does he have to do to kind of win this fight? I'm trying to picture this fight in my head because Romero's a bit of a he's got a bit of an awkward style in some ways. He's obviously not very orthodox. You can see that he started at 17, but that almost works in his favor a little bit. I think he does punch hard. I think physically, he's strong for the weight. But I'm just thinking in my head, like, how's this guy gonna beat Lopez, who should be, technically a lot better than him? I know obviously it sounds very usual to say, but is it just a case of, dirty tactics for Alan Romero trying to impose himself on Teofimo? I know we're not even sure who the bigger guy is going to be in the ring because, as we are saying, frame wise, Teofimo does look big enough 147. But yeah, does he need to be a bit dirty in this fight, Romero? Does he need to kind of try to impose his physical strength on Lopez to have some success?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like, I'd say with Romero, from what I've seen of him at least, he doesn't throw an awful lot of punches. Like, he's not, a big volume guy. So, he kind of relies on, that physical strength, and he's quite a sturdy guy in terms of he's not very light on his feet. I guess we could say, he'll hold his feet, he'll stand in the pocket and trade, and obviously that can be to his detriment because we saw him, charge into range against Tank and get knocked out. And, I think there's been similar outcome. Obviously, the Isaac Cruz fight, which I don't remember too much of, but that was another stoppage defeat. So he is quite vulnerable, Romero. Like, I think he's got a decent chin. If he can see a shot coming, then he'll take it. But he does put himself in those situations where he can get knocked out. And I suppose you got to give him credit for that because, he's a high risk type of guy. Like, he's willing to, take that gamble and try and land a big shot of his own. But yeah, I'd say like you said, it would make sense for him to kind of want to stay in the pocket a little bit, impose his strength, and yeah, maybe like some of the dark arts could be on show against Lopez. Obviously, Lopez, I think against Stevenson, obviously, like a lot of fighters end up doing this, but he fell into the trap of you know, playing to Stevenson's tune, I guess you could say. Like, I think the natural rhythm of Stevenson just completely bamboozled him. And I don't think that's going to be an issue against Romero because he's just a completely different stylistic fighter to Stevenson, obviously. So I think stylistically, on paper, like it favors Lopez the matchup just in terms of natural athleticism, his footwork. I think he'll, be able to move around Romero a lot. I think he'll definitely cause him problems with that. But then Romero, I think he'll be wanting to take big risks in this fight. Like he'll want to stay in the pocket and see what he can land. I don't think he's a massive puncher, Romero. Like he does hit hard, but he's not like a knockout specialist as such. But he'll I think he'll try to go for the knockout. Like I can't see him winning on points, to be honest. I know he beat Garcia on points, but I think he'll either need like a knockdown, a couple knockdowns, or go for the stoppage. And I can't see that happening, but obviously, if he's willing to take those risks, which I think he will be, then that he's got a chance at least.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned the Tank fight. I do remember the Tank fight, and he was actually. I know a lot of people do this with Tank, but he did win a few rounds against Tank and was doing fairly well before he got clipped. And like you rightfully mentioned, he has been knocked out a couple times. So I guess what's interesting in this fight is just we don't know what Lopez is going to be like at 147. Like we know what Romero's like at 147. We know what he looks like. We know he's healthy at the weight. We just don't know. Yeah, I guess that's the biggest factor here, I suppose. Um, yeah, Teofimo, I think it'd be silly not to just play the boxing game, really, not
Mm.
get involved in a fight, really. You know, he should have the superior boxing skills. He should just be able to pick Romero off. To be honest, he's got better footwork. He's got just a better boxer overall. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't do that. But then again, like we said, you know, Lopez has been it's very hot and cold sometimes. You know, something's very hot and cold. But to become a free world champion, I'm expecting the best version of Lopez for sure. Where do you rank these guys compared to the other guys at 147? We've mentioned some names, obviously Garcia, Conor Ben, Devin Haney. I know we've almost got like a bit of a semi-final going on, regardless of what you think about Conor Ben and stuff like that. You know, Garcia, you know, it's very possible the winner of, you know, the winner of Garcia, Ben, could face the winner of Lopez and Romero or even Haney. If you were to rank them at the moment, without the fights happening yet, who give me your top five from the names I mentioned from yeah, how would you rank them?
I think Devin Haney's definitely top. I think, and it's funny actually because where Haney was almost like the heel of boxing, like a lot of people kind of giving him a lot of stick. People didn't really take to his personality too much. Now he's almost become a bit of a fan favorite. Like if you see like some of the talk on social media, I think people are starting to really respect what he's all about, and he does go for the big challenges. Like you can't say that he prices himself out or runs scared. Like, I know fighters aren't scared, but he will go for the big challenges. And obviously, you had that debacle with Keyshawn Davis where he clearly wanted that fight, and obviously Davis ended up pulling out. But I think just in terms of what Devin Haney's proven and his performances, I'd put him top. Um, and then it gets a little bit tricky because obviously, as you say, we've not seen Lopez at the weight. And to be honest with you, I don't know what to take from Garcia's Barrios win. Like, I know it was a dominant win, but like, how good is Mario Barrios, like realistically? And will we see that version of Ryan Garcia again? Because we know that he's a fighter who likes to blow hot and cold as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
So Ryan Garcia is a very difficult one to put in any kind of rankings, in my opinion. And Conor Ben, I'd certainly put him at the bottom, just to put it away. I mean, yeah, I've got my own opinion on Conor Ben, and I don't think he deserves to be anywhere near a title shot, a world title shot. I just don't think, regardless of everything that's happened, I don't think he's at that level. He's done nothing to prove that he's a world level fighter, whereas at least Ryan Garcia's got himself a title. At
Yeah.
least, Lopez has had enormous success in lower weights. So yeah, I'd firmly put Conor Ben at the bottom of that list, and then I guess you could kind of mix and match Ryan Garcia, Lopez, and Romero. But obviously, if Lopez wins this fight, then I think he's a firm like kind of second in the division. I don't think he can overtake Devin Haney just yet, but I think the winner of this fight, put it this way, I'd have them as number two basically.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. I think I agree. And yeah, Haney is true. But look, sorry, Haney has obviously done really well as well. You know, he's got a win over. I know the win against Lomachenko was, you know, it was controversial to some, but you know, it's still a win. He's already a freeweight world champion, isn't he, Devin Haney? So, you know, he's done really well, and I agree. He doesn't duck anyone. He definitely doesn't duck anyone. He always goes for the toughest challenges. I guess the only one for Haney is obviously you know, the performance, whatever you want to call it, against Garcia, where he was obviously, you know, Garcia failed the drugs test. We know the story, but you know, I guess that wasn't a good look for him. But still, on paper, he's unbeaten. So I would agree with you there. I think I would go, yeah, for myself. I think I'd go Haney first. I'd go Teofimo second, just for the benefit that if I'm talking about talent wise, I think Teofimo is probably, you know, first or even second talented out of the five for sure. I know we don't know what he's like at 147 yet, but I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's second. And then I'd probably say, I don't know. It's interesting because Garcia lost to Romero. I think Garcia is more talented than Romero. Really, you know, he shouldn't have. In theory, he shouldn't have lost. But I don't know. I guess you maybe could put Romero third, Garcia fourth, and then Conor Ben fifth at the moment. But let's see how things pan out. All right, then finally, let's give our predictions. Oscar, who you picking and how?
I'll be going with Lopez on points. Yeah, I can't see him stopping Romero. Like we've obviously spoken about the power. I think he will have enough power to maybe get Romero's respect to a certain extent, but I can't see him stopping Romero. Like I said, Romero. Well, I can. I won't rule it out, but like I think it's more likely that he wins on points because Romero, although like I said, he does put himself in certain situations where he can definitely get knocked out. Um, he's ultimately shown a pretty sturdy chin throughout a lot of his career, and I think I think it will just be a case of Lopez kind of outclassing him a little bit. Like we've mentioned, the talent, the athleticism, the skills. I just think it'll be a fairly convincing points win.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think I agree with you. I think it's hard to pick against Lopez in this fight. It's hard to pick against. I think he's going to rise to the occasion, and I think he's going to win on points. I still don't think the power is going to be there. He might prove me wrong and knock Romero out in 5 rounds. If that's the case, so be it. I'm not convinced he's going to knock Romero out. I think he's going to be another points win. And yeah, he's going to just be a bit too skillful for Romero, a bit too well schooled, and maybe a bit too experienced. And he's got this new DAZN deal as well. I think, yeah, it will kind of be in his favor. So I'm picking Lopez for, yeah, a points win, basically. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are our thoughts. If you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.